We have had a deck leak that has driven us crazy since we bought this boat. I've drilled a bunch of holes inside of our door aid vent.
What's your beef, huh? Tired of your toys?
That I'm going to inject the epoxy into and hopefully solidify up our deck. Renata, are you coughing during my monologue?
Last time on Sailing Soulianis.
This is like a whole new thing for us.
After spending the off-season in the Midwest getting used to being parents, we brought our 4-month-old baby Renata back to Soulianis.
What do you think of the boat?
Instead of staying in the boatyard like we usually do to finish projects before launching, we decided to stay in an Airbnb, a much easier setup with a baby. This meant while I watched Renata, Kirk had been tackling nearly all the work himself. The biggest issue being the leak in our cabin top deck.
Any boat with a wooden core, balsa core specifically, built in the 70s or 80s, unless it's all been repaired, it's gonna have some core rot. These boats were built fantastically, but nobody really thought they were gonna be around this long. Nobody really understood how strong fiberglass was gonna be. So this boat has balsa core decks, and if it gets a little bit wet and it dries out, it's fine. It retains a lot of its strength, but it's when it keeps getting wet and it stays wet and more moisture keeps getting in. We are chasing down a leak. Over 40 years, the balsa eventually turns to mush. It can't absorb and release all of the moisture when it's trapped inside of the deck. Last year, we tried to repair some core rot around the chain plate on our port side. And there was a massive amount of glass reinforcements around the chain plate. So I didn't want to cut into that from below because that's where most of the reinforcements were, right around the bulkhead. So I drilled a number of holes. I was going to inject some epoxy, and ultimately I decided there was just too much rot. I was just going to cut up a piece of the skin, cut out the core, put a new core, epoxied over the top, laid down some new gel coat, did a terrible job matching it. My mold kind of worked. It imprinted the new non-skid surface in there, but it just didn't match up very well. So this time I'm gonna go a little different route.
Renata tries solid food for the first time.
Hey Renata, you wanna get up?
And gets a kick out of being vertical.
So I have picked up Total Boat Penetrating Epoxy. This is incredibly watery. It will travel all of the same paths that the water travels. So what I've done is I've drilled a bunch of holes inside of our door aid vent that I'm going to inject the epoxy into, and hopefully we're gonna have it travel wherever the water went. It's gonna follow the path of the leak and fill in all of those little voids, fill in all of the rotted balsa wood, and hopefully solidify up our deck. So that's the plan. I'm going to inject some Total Boat Penetrating Epoxy into a bunch of holes in our door aid box, and then kind of cross my fingers and hope it does its job.
Are you getting bored? No comment.
All right, no more party. It's time for business. I've used West Systems epoxy in the past. Their stuff is really, really thick. They say you can thin it a little bit, but they don't really recommend thinning it. So that's why I went with the penetrating epoxy. So I've already got happening what I wanted to have happen. There's our leak. Okay. So there's this metal collar that has been glassed in, and I think our issue is metal expands and contracts at a different ratio to fiberglass. So over the years, it's just sort of broken its way free from the fiberglass around it, and basically it leaks all the way around the metal collar. So as this starts to kick off, hopefully it will fill that void and it will stop leaking. If it fixes this, then all I have to do is fill up the rest of the core and no more leak. And no more deck rot. So that's 71. So this is pretty interesting. That is 84. I've got to be careful or else I might burn my boat down. 74, 93. I've put so much epoxy in that I'm actually getting a pretty solid exothermic reaction going on here. 105. What's really neat though is I can actually tell where the epoxy is moving to by using my temperature gun. 90, 80, 70. This is the hot spot right here. So I was putting my hand up here trying to catch the couple of the drips with a brush, and I felt a little bit of heat. Started to freak out. I can't get too much more epoxy in there right now or else it's gonna just keep heating up and bad things will happen. So normal temperature is about 71. Science is cool. There's like a puddle of epoxy in here that's now hardened kind of overnight.
Oh, wow.
We had another leak that came out right here. It was just dripping out right there. And then this is my vacuum port where I was sucking epoxy in and it actually came into here and now it's all kind of hardened here. So I've got a little bit of epoxy that's come through. So the ambient temperature in here is about 82. And if I go over here, and there we're seeing 88. Ooh, 120, 140. Yeah, that's a little hot right there. That's a hot spot. That's why I wanted to stop for a little while. And then it goes out this way, 188. So it stops right about there, and then starts cooling off. So it's migrating down this way. What I've been afraid of is it going down here and then pooling like on the headliner in our pilot berth because it's so liquidy. Like that's the beauty and the curse. Like it'll just go everywhere. If you have holes everywhere, it's going everywhere. But it's moving down, and this was the super soft spot that I was really worried about, and this is solidifying. This is much harder now. So it's doing its job. It's sealing up all the holes. It's making the deck more solid. But I see why they call it total boat epoxy. Because when you're done, pretty much your total boat is going to be just epoxy. At least ours. At least ours is. But it's doing its job. I'm pumped. Oh god, that butyl is so sticky. So I had two options the other day. I could pull down that vacuum port and have all the epoxy drain out because it's so watery, or I could leave it in. I was hoping that maybe the vacuum port was the same type of plastic as the bag, which epoxy doesn't stick to. It wasn't. It epoxied it right in there. But I don't even know the name of this tool. These things are awesome for cutting fiberglass. It's what they use to cut casts off of people because it just vibrates back and forth a tiny bit. This one does more than a cast. Those are ultrasonic, but if it's got a nice flat blade, you can literally cut right along a surface, which is awesome. It's exactly what I needed because I didn't want to cut into the underside skin of the cabin top, so I just slid the blade right along the glass and just cut right through the epoxy. I think I'm gonna call it good.
We were pretty certain we'd fixed the leak in the Doriad box, and the penetrating epoxy worked splendidly. But since we'd already pulled the headliner down, we decided to rebed this nearby fairlead just to be sure.
That hole is just a straight drill through the deck with like a whole bunch of cut off stuff from the drill bit. This is how you want it to look. Use a countersink bit to cut the edges down so that your sealant has a place to live and it can expand and contract, and it's not just a flat 90-degree cut on the hole. You want it at 45. Countersunk bit, good. Regular drill bit, bad. And you use just a little bit of solvent, whatever you want. I've got alcohol right now. Clean up all the dirt, all the residue, all the wax, all the oil, so that you've got nothing standing between the hardware you want to bond and seal to the deck. Butyl is my sealant of choice. I'm going to take the butyl and I'm going to cover this entire base, and then I'm going to wrap a tiny bit right around each post, mount the hardware, squeeze it down and scrape off any of the butyl that squeezes out from underneath this.
Half naked baby.
Well, we are wrapping up, what, 3 weeks of
Almost 3 weeks.
parenting.
Yeah, alone for the first time.
Oh God, get the drill, get the drill. Yeah, for the first 3 months having a baby, we've had significant help from the grandmothers and grandfathers. And we've been in this Airbnb here in Florida for 3 weeks now.
And now we're moving from a normal house to
the boat.
80 square feet and no dishwasher and no washer and dryer.
And no 120 volt shore power.
Yeah,
and
not having both parents being able to stand up straight to rock the baby to sleep.
yeah, that's gonna be a big one. So it's like little baby steps for us.
This is the ticket to non-crying car rides right here.
As long as it doesn't pick up the sun and shine it straight. So I noticed our last few chain links were looking pretty rusty while we were hauled out here. So I decided I was just gonna cut off the last 5 or 6 links, take apart the swivel that we have, and put it all back together, rebuild it. But the shackle that we have taking the chain to the anchor, the bolt was spinning freely. The only thing preventing it from spinning was the little bit of seizing wire that I had on there. As soon as I started to untwist that, it just broke off. So our shackle and anchor could have worked itself free pretty easily.
Big stretch.
How's it going over there?
So this is breakfast now. Oh, we used to be so spoiled rotten. With our 3-course breakfasts of grapefruit, eggs and toast, and fruit bowls, and lounging in the cockpit. And now we stand and scarf. Don't we? This is this little monster.
Hi, little monster.
To be fair, she's tired and she needs a nap.
Last night was the first night aboard with the babe, and today will be the first full day after moving out of the Airbnb. We got like maybe a third of the stuff that we needed to put away yesterday put away. So it's just been, you know, everything moves slowly. But we're taking it one step at a time. The boat's not moving right now. We don't have to worry about dragging anchor. We don't have to worry about storms. The boat moving around, rocking us, having her fall over or something.
Yeah, that's our biggest issue, is trying to figure out where to put her when the boat starts moving. We'll probably bring the car seat, and we have to figure out where to strap that down. So that'll be like her rolly sea berth, I suppose.
Right.
Right?
We've got a pretty dirty fuel tank, and I've got some pretty dirty fuel. A couple of days ago, I tried scrubbing out the walls of the fuel tank because they've just been coated in like this biofilm. That definitely worked. I had like about a fist-sized mass of just black tarry gook at the bottom of the tank. And I used my little manual priming bulb to pump fresh fuel in, pump the dirty fuel back out, and I pumped it through this. It's just a little portable fuel filter. It's got just a tiny little screen filter in there, and it was getting gunked up way too fast. So I went online and I bought the cheapest little oil change pump that I could find, because I've also been pumping out my oil through the dipstick whenever I do an oil change manually. So my thought is I'm going to try and use this pump for like a little cheap do-it-yourself fuel polishing system, as well as to change my oil. And the piece de resistance Fram inline fuel filter. These things are super cheap. I'm just basically gonna cycle fuel through this filter and back into the fuel tank using that little fuel pump and slowly clean the gunk out of the tank. I'll be able to see in through the translucent housing to when it starts to get all black and gunked up. So I'm gonna set this up now, and let it run for a little bit while I do a few other projects around the boat. So this is gonna go down to the bottom of the tank, down there, and this is gonna dump it out right back on top. So I'm actually gonna start this process by pumping out of my jerry can into the fuel tank there. Okay, here goes nothing. Some nasty fuel down in the bottom there. I'm gonna make a couple modifications here. I noticed the pump was sucking well enough that this would get stuck to the side of the fuel tank. So I'm gonna cut a slit out of that, and then I'm going to attach it to my trusty wire here to ensure that I can push it all the way down to the bottom of the tank. There we go. That looks better. So this is just gonna go zoop right down to the bottom of the tank. Other than the noise, I'm pretty pumped. For $25, should have a nice clean fuel tank. And I'll be able to change my oil super fast. So I've been running this little fuel polisher for probably an hour now. I think the fuel is as clean as it's gonna get, so I'm gonna try and start up Mr. Beak for the first time. Bring him to life. Ah. So when we got down to salt water, I plumbed up this fitting here with a little T-valve so I can pull water in through the sea strainer, or I can connect a garden hose here. I put a bucket right outside in the cockpit. I set that up thinking that whenever we pulled into a marina, I'd just run the engine for a little bit to clean out the salt water. But it's actually made it super easy to fire them up on the hard as well. It's pretty simple system, but it's been super useful. Yeah, Mr. Beak. Things are moving along today. I cleaned out the heat exchanger because our zinc blew up inside, and I got the oil changed. I'm just about to put the new oil in and fire them back up again and make sure I've got no oil leaks, no water leaks. All right, Mr. Beak ran for an hour, and we've got just the tiniest drip or two down there. So that's about as clean as I can expect he'll ever be. I'm happy. My biggest complaint with the Tartan 37 engine setup is that to do all of this, I have to have every single panel off the engine, which just is a ton of stuff, and it means that I have to like move all of our things from out of their storage, and it just makes the boat a giant nightmare. So of course we've got the forward hatch open. We've got this side part open, which we have to remove all of our storage so that I can climb down back in there to get to the oil filter. And then it's kind of just popped out right now, but we have to completely empty our cockpit locker and pull that piece off right there to get into the fuel pump down there and the heat exchanger. And so everything just gets piled up here, and I gotta take all the lines out, and everything gets piled up there and piled up in the back. And I know it's probably impossible, but if everything were just all in one spot, or I only had to take off one part of the engine hatches, I'd have to move so much less stuff, and this would be like a 10 times faster job. But boats.
We're on the water.
We
with
are.
the baby.
With the baby. Baby's first sail today.
We're going to the ocean!